Hello Gunners and Hunters, Aaron here, back with another video. Finally, after her debut about 9 months ago now, Clorinde is officially being added into Genshin. But what does she do? How do you want to build her? How good is she? That's what I'm here for. Before we get into the swing of things, I just have to say that if you do like my content, why not take a bite out of that long de shot flavored subscribe button down below. Now let's hop into the overview. Clorinde is an Electro main DPS driver that focuses on her normal attack damage and tanking for her team. Despite Clorinde working as a normal attack DPS, her damage potential is reliant on her elemental skill instead of her actual normal attacks, similarly to Tartaglia. In this state, she gains an Electro infusion on her normal attacks. These normal attacks become ranged and pierce, and she gains a new elemental skill that has no cooldown. In this state, her normal attacks are enhanced when her current Bond of Life amount is less than 100% of her max HP, and her skill is enhanced when the Bond of Life amount is at least 100% of her max HP. When enhanced, her normal attacks deal increased damage and grant her a Bond of Life worth 35% of her max HP when she hits an enemy. Her skill enhancement allows it to heal her for 110% of her current Bond of Life amount. It deals damage 3 times, and its damaging area has a larger AoE. Additionally, the damage dealt by her new skill and these enhanced normal attacks count as normal attack damage for scaling purposes. Clorinde's burst is pretty simple. It's just Keqing's burst, except it has the best burst animation in the game, and also grants her a Bond of Life equal to a large portion of her HP, ranging from 66% to 138% of her max HP depending on level. Her first Ascension passive grants Clorinde increased attack scaling on her burst and any normal attack damage she deals. When any party member triggers an Electro reaction, damage dealt by Clorinde's normal attacks and burst will be increased by 20% of her attack, stacking up to 3 times. The maximum damage increase that can be achieved this way is 1800 base damage, capping at 3000 attack. Oddly enough, this is where a significant portion of Clorinde's damage comes from, since her scalings, while in her elemental skill, are so low. This passive will end up making up to about 30 to 50% of Clorinde's total damage output. Clorinde's 4th Ascension passive grants her 10% crit rate for 15 seconds after her current Bond of Life amount increases to 100% of her max HP or beyond, and when it decreases from above 100% to below 100%. This effect can stack up to 2 times, which, when included with her crit Ascension stat, grants her a base 44.2% crit rate. Clorinde's talent priority is a little strange because it's not what you'd think it'd be. You'd think that since most of her damage is done in her elemental skill state, then we would want to level that first. However, the multipliers on it are very low, even when at max level. Instead, her skill deals so much damage because of her Ascension 1 passive space damage boost, which makes up to half of her damage output while she's in her elemental skill. So while it is where most of her damage comes from, you don't have to level it first. The largest damage difference she gets in her levels comes from her burst, which you should level first since its damage multipliers get a large boost. Then we have her skill, which does not need to be leveled completely, but should still be leveled up to a minimum of 6. She gets no benefit from her normal attacks though, so those should not be leveled. It's simply a waste of resources. As a main DPS, Clorinde is best used as the 4th member in a team's rotation to maximize her on-field presence. Once on-field, Clorinde has a few combos you could do depending on the situation, but by default, her best combo is to use her burst first, then enter her skill state, and then repeat a rhythm of skill and 3 normal attacks until the duration is over. This is super consistent and will keep her health topped off in all situations. However, if using Thundering Fury, you can completely ignore using her burst, since this set gives her skill's enhanced state almost permanent uptime. This means that all you want to do with Thundering Fury is enter her enhanced skill state and repeat 3 normal attacks, then skill until the duration is over. After that, her skill should be back off cooldown, at which point you can reapply buffs or use it again until all of her buffs are gone. For Shimenawa's Reminiscence, you cannot use her burst first since she won't get the buff from Shimenawa's, so use her normal attack and skill repeating combo and save her burst for after the combo is over. But that's only her base kit. There's still her Constellations to mention. Clorinde's first Constellation grants her 2 coordinated attacks that trigger at the same time once every 1.2 seconds every time she attacks during her skill state. While these coordinated attacks might count as normal attacks, which can get buffed by her Ascension 1 passive, they still deal very little damage and have a small AoE. Due to these downsides, she does not gain a hefty damage increase from this constellation, making it rather underwhelming, especially since we've been receiving such strong C1s very recently. Her C2 is definitely much better, though it is still behind the other C2s we have been getting recently. This constellation buffs her Ascension 1 passive effects base damage bonus by 50%, which is huge since it is where most of her damage came from anyway. On top of that, her interruption resistance defense increases dramatically while she's in her elemental skills state. It offers her the same interruption resistance as Xingqiu's swords, which means it's pretty freaking nutty. At this point, Clorinde would be on par with the strongest DPS in the game, making this constellation very beneficial for her overall. Her C3 increases the level of her skill by 3. This would be good, but again, leveling her skill does not increase her damage much, since most of her skill's damage comes from her Ascension 1 passive effect. Her C4, on the other hand, is actually very powerful for her burst damage capabilities. It increases the scaling on her burst by twice the percentage of Bond of Life she has, capping at 200%. Since her burst can grant over 100% Bond of Life, she will almost always gain the maximum damage boost from this constellation as long as her burst is level 7 or higher. This ends up leading to about a 65% damage increase for her burst, but it's not where the bulk of her damage comes from. Despite that, it still ends up leading to the second largest damage increase she has in her constellations. Clorinde's C5 increases the level of her burst by 3. However, her C4 reduced the impact that this bonus has, making it just as unnecessary as her C3. And now we have her C6, which makes up for the lack of powerful constellations she has had leading up to this point. This thing is stupidly overpowered. 12 seconds after she uses her skill, her C6 grants her 10% crit rate, 70% crit damage, 80% damage mitigation, immunity to knockbacks and interrupts, and another source of damage in her skill that deals similar damage to her normal attacks that also has one of the largest area of effects in the game. It fixes Clorinde's single target issue and her low raw damage without reactions, while also massively buffing her own survivability by making her nearly immune to damage and making her immune to being knocked around. If this constellation had only half the effects it does now, I would still rank it 5 out of 5 due to it being insanely beneficial. The fact that it comes with so much that it's basically like adding a whole nother character into Clorinde's base kit is what really turns this one into one of the best constellations in the game. When looking at all of Clorinde's constellations, it seems she has certain thresholds for them. She really does not get a lot of benefits from her odd numbered constellations and only sees spikes when it comes to her even ones, but each spike becomes greater and greater the further she goes down the line. At C6, Clorinde is nearly 150% stronger than a C0 Clorinde, with over half of that increase coming from her C6. However, if you do want Clorinde to perform her role just as well as the best DPS in the game can, going for her C2 is another threshold to reach. Now that we've finished with what she offers at a free-to-play and whale level, let's move on to gearing Clorinde up. Clorinde's best artifact is Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy, which is pretty obvious. Attack percent and a large 54% damage bonus to her entire kit is nothing to scoff at and will always be her best option. One option that's slightly behind Fragment is Thundering Fury due to its ability to extend her on-field time without using her burst. This lets her build less energy recharge to instead build more into damaging substats. This is so effective that it ends up being her second best artifact option behind her signature by only about 3%. However, both of these sets are incredibly resin inefficient to farm for. Thankfully, she does have some more resin efficient options in both Gladiator's Finale and Shimenawa's Reminiscence. Both of these tend to be about 10% worse than Fragment of Harmonic Whimsy, even Shimenawa, despite providing a larger buff. This is because you need to use her burst at the end of the rotation with Shimenawa, which then requires some ramp up time and damage for her normal attacks. This ends up basically negating the extra damage percent this artifact provides, which is quite a shame. For her main stats, you're looking for the usual attack, damage percent, and crit, preferably crit damage though. Substats are relatively normal too. Energy recharge until the requirement, hers being around 125% without Fischl or Thundering Fury, then crit aiming toward 90 to 180 crit ratio, and finishing off with attack and elemental mastery if you could fit those in. But that's just her artifact options. We still have her weapons to go through, starting with her signature Absolution. Absolution is her signature sword and her best in slot. It offers her a massive amount of stats for her to benefit from, and it's super easy to activate the effect for her, but it's not super versatile since every other unit cannot activate the passive effect. The weapon becomes a worse jade cutter on everyone else. So if you do want a weapon that is more worth it, the next ones are for you. Her run is very similar to her signature, but with its ups and downs. It ends up providing her a similar damage ceiling to Absolution, but with the downside that it provides a lot of crit rate. Clorinde starts off with 44.2% crit rate at a base, so crit rate weapons end up making it harder for her to get the correct stats she wants. Despite that downside, it is still very good for her and is her second best weapon available. Mistsplitter Reforged is up next, though it's not as good as the others. Despite that, it's still very easy to build into and provides her with all the stats she could ever want. Primordial Jade Cutter is also a great weapon option for more tankiness alongside damage, but with the massive downside that it would grant her a total of 88.3% crit rate with no crit damage. This makes it easy to reach the crit rate cap, but makes balancing her crit ratio a living nightmare. Light of Foliar Incision is a better version of Jade Cutter as it grants her more base damage based on her elemental mastery, it grants her a lot of crit damage, and it comes with a minor crit rate boost. Uraku Misugiri is also good as a base weapon due to the crit damage and damage percent bonuses it offers, despite never offering its maximum damage bonus. Splendor of Tranquil Waters is a worse version of Uraku as it will really only offer her crit damage with nothing else. Skyward Blade is a strong stat stick for her to use. This weapon grants a large base attack, energy recharge, crit, movement speed, attack speed, and more attack scaling on her normal attacks after she uses her burst. These are all stats she really desires and will prove to be super strong on her unless she's using Thundering Fury. Black Sword is also very valuable for her due to the crit rate it offers, plus the normal attack damage increase. It even grants extra healing that will occur twice per rotation, granting her a bond of life worth anywhere between 17 and 40% of her max HP per rotation too, which is a nice bonus to her self-sustain. Harbinger of Dawn is her best free-to-play weapon available due to the massive amount of crit stats it offers and her easy time sustaining through damage. Her sustain allows her to stay above 90% of her max health with ease to consistently keep the passive crit rate bonus active even when an HP draining unit like Furina is on the team. Freedom Sworn is another powerful stat stick she has at her disposal that can also buff her teammates. However, the buff from this weapon is not very strong for all field units. Despite that, it can perform even better than Harbinger of Dawn in Dendro-related teams. Sapwood is last as a great free-to-play pickup for her. While it won't be amazing outside of Dendro teams, it still performs very well in many situations. The Elemental Mastery, Energy Recharge, and large base attack make it her best craftable option available. But what about weapons like the Finale of the Deep? Why does it not perform as well as others? Due to Clorinde's need for many stats like Energy Recharge, damage percent, and crit, and because Clorinde's teams have many ways to increase her base damage output through large amounts of attack and through the aggravate reaction, weapons that offer just attack like Summit Shaper and Finale of the Deep do not end up being very valuable for her. Instead, weapons that offer attack plus other stats like Skyward Blade and Sapwood Blade tend to be the preferred options for Clorinde, even in the event those options are not utilized to their fullest. However, if able to reach some of Clorinde's requirements through her substats or if using Thundering Fury, the more damage-oriented weapons will prove to be the stronger options. This is especially the case for Finale of the Deep, which proves to be about just as valuable as the Harbinger of Dawn is for her in these situations. Now that we geared her up, we have to put her in a team, preferably with her best teammates, starting with Furina. Furina is definitely one of the best pairs with Clorinde, as she can easily enable the Electro Lady to deal massive damage under any circumstance. This unit grants Clorinde a massive damage buff, AoE Hydro application for Clorinde to instantly max her Ascension 1 passive, and the ability to massively buff Clorinde's personal healing output. One of the things I constantly forget is that Clorinde's self-heal is the 110% of her Bond of Life amount. This would usually translate to a 10% plus max HP heal. One of the benefits of Furina is that her healing received buff for the team impacts this to turn Clorinde's self-heal from about 50% plus of her max HP to 135% plus max HP heal on average, with each heal healing her for 30% to 45% of her max HP. This turns Clorinde into a monster of a tank, especially if she's paired with other units that also offer some defensive capabilities like Beidou. Speaking of, she's the next character I want to mention because of her ability to shred Electro resistances, grant a shield and damage mitigations to Clorinde, and because Clorinde can very easily drive and battery Beidou somewhat similarly to how the Raiden Shogun used to in her beta. These two units also both excel in the same team comps while also not impeding on what the other wants to do. One can focus on the single target and hyperbloom damage while the other can focus on dealing large raw damage in an AoE. They're the perfect duo that can work in many situations. Lastly, we have Nahida, who can apply Dendro in an AoE for hyperbloom and aggravate, which both complement Clorinde's fast attacks, who will massively buff Clorinde's elemental mastery, and who can act as a pseudo-defensive support when used with Prototype Amber. Pseudo-defensive supports are incredible with Clorinde since she can act as a tank for the team. Nahida can choose to take this slot in the team if she needs to, which will prove to be very beneficial for Clorinde's team comps. We have her Dendro-related ones first, which all follow the same format with only one character affecting what team you're running. All of these normally want Nahida and Beidou or Fischl, depending on whether you're using her in single target or AoE. First up is Aggravate, which requires an Anemo unit like Kazuha, Sucrose, Venti, or Lynette, though Kazuha is preferred. While it might be hard to swirl Electro due to Nahida, this team has such an overwhelming amount of it that the Animo unit should not have a terrible time swirling the element. Quick Bloom is next, which replaces the Animo unit with a slow hydro applicator, specifically Fiorina. Due to Clorinde's lack of incredible personal damage, she needs to rely on other damage dealers. While Kokomi and Candace can be good applicators for Quick Bloom, they both don't have good damage for Clorinde's teams. This means that these comps are practically bound to Fiorina for usability. Hyper Bloom, however, isn't bound to Fiorina, as these comps can perform well with both Jingshou as a 4-star unit or Yelan as a powerful damage dealing upgrade. Either can work and will prove to be beneficial in their own way. Overload works with Clorinde too, but it's not as good for her as it can be with other units. But still, Chevreuse and Clorinde can work together quite nicely, and if it's not performing up to snuff, just swap out Chevy for Jingshou, and now you got another national comp. Easy peasy. Mono Electro is the final comp to go over, which requires the use of Fischl and either Beto or Kujosara. However, the last slot cannot go to another Electro character due to Clorinde's reliance on reactions for her personal damage. This means that an Animo unit like Kazuha would have to make up the last slot. Without another unit creating Electro reactions, Clorinde's personal damage backflips off of a cliff into a ravine and cracks its head open on the rocks down below. Now with that done, let's finish off the video with her rating. Clorinde's damage output is on the higher end. While it's not the best in the game, it is super consistent, easy to use, and is still great in many situations, which I think earns her a 4 out of 5 for damage output. In terms of application, Clorinde's is okay. It might be relatively fast, but most of it is only applicable while on field, and it's single target focus for the most part. This puts her slightly below average at a 2 out of 5 in my eyes. For offensive utility, Clorinde has none, so I think she earns a 0 out of 5 here. Clorinde's battery potential is 4 electro particles over her rotation. This is slightly below average for most units, so I think she deserves a simple 2 out of 5 for battery potential. In terms of defense, Clorinde's is a tank and a half. While she does not have the HP of one, her self-sustain is so strong that she will constantly be able to stay at max HP or near to it with ease. However, she has no team sustain or any way to reduce the damage she takes, and she has no interruption resistance, so I think she earns a 2.5 out of 5 for defensive utility. And finally, there's flexibility and versatility. While Clorinde may only be able to be used as a main DPS, she can be used in every single Electro team in the game as long as there are some sort of Electro reactions going on. All of this makes her much more versatile than many other Electro units in the game, earning her a 3 out of 5. Overall, Clorinde is a very good unit. She has great damage, great survivability, and is very versatile. She doesn't lack in many other areas either, which earns her a 2.5 in my book. She's a strong all-rounder that can be used as the DPS and tank for the team. This is where she excels, and this is the main reason to pick her up. However, her main issue is that she does not excel at doing one thing, which will always make other units more desirable over her. Despite that, she is still incredibly good and will always be a great pickup due to her ease of use, versatility, and consistency. But those are just my thoughts on her. What do you all think of her? How do you plan to build her? Who do you plan to pair her with? Anyone going for Constellations? Tell me what you plan to do with Clorinde down below. But with that, I will skedaddle. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye!